Yo, 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 guys, what is going on? Welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast. I got another guest. I think I've had a guest for like the last month and a half. We have Zariq from Real BULLYBALL. What's going on, man?
What's up, dude? It's a long time no see, like in a virtual context, but it's good to be on here. I saw you had James on here a little bit, so got a lot to follow, big shoes to fill, but trying to
Yeah,
do it.
we had James on. We had Corey Woods on last week. So, like I
Yep,
said, I've been
yep,
trying to
got
get a
everybody.
guest like every week
Hmm.
because I'd rather talk with someone than me ramble for an hour and not make
Yeah,
sense. And I sound like an idiot. But
I think you do a pretty good job.
I try, man. I try. But before we do talk some Pistons. Obviously, I want to give you the floor to promote Real Bully Ball because I know you do content over there,
Yeah.
and I know you also do a whole lot of other things. So if you want to promote or plug anything, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's see. Bully Ball is my platform slash outlet. We cover basketball, football, baseball season's coming up. Obviously, I'm mostly a basketball guy. I've been covering the Pistons this season. I've been covering the Crews before that. And in general, I try to do as much as I can. I write, I do photos, I do videos. And then my friend Jake, who also helps run Bully Ball, is like a big baseball, football guy, especially college football. Um, he was very happy when Michigan won the title, which was one of our most recent stories. I do need to get more stories out, which will be happening this month. I've been a little slammed with school and just life in general as well because I am a full-time student at Michigan State right now. Go Green. Um,
Go away.
yeah. And outside of that, you can find me at Zariq Xavier, where I post usually on Twitter, like my thoughts, just in NBA context or just in general. And then on Instagram at Zariq Xavier as well, where I post all my photography for Bully Ball and then just like my general photography, videography I do. I've been trying to, step up in terms of producing art a little more frequently. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I did because I've been working so much. I put Real Bully Ball and I think your Twitter down below in the description. So if you guys want to go check them out there. Um,
Appreciate you.
you'll probably realize this is Zark when you go on Twitter and then you see his Pistons hype videos that are absolutely I love them. Like you and Carl, I swear you guys are the goats of Twitter when it comes to hype videos. Like you get me way too excited about a team I shouldn't be this excited about. But I'm glad we actually get to talk some basketball because I know
For
you're a huge
sure.
Piston fan like myself.
Yeah. So I've been trying to be more objective, especially this past season in terms of covering the team. Obviously, anybody who knows me knows I grew up a fan, which is not a bad thing. I know, like the most sports writers try to cover a team they weren't a fan of, but I can take my fandom out, and especially this year, it's been kind of a little easier to do that, um, because not a great season. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back to podcast in October. Did a podcast with Everything King, and me and him setting 30 wins. We look like idiots. But let's focus back to the Pistons now. We have All Star Weekend, obviously.
Yep.
This has probably been the most boring All Star Weekend I've ever seen in
Yeah.
the last like 5 years.
Yeah, I can't blame you.
But we actually saw some smoke with Bennedict Mathurin and Jaden Ivey, and this is a beef that I don't know a lot of fans if they've been following this beef. It's a beef that started during the draft process
Hmm.
where Bennedict Mathurin wanted to be the 5th overall pick. Obviously, he wasn't. He went 6th to Indiana.
Yeah.
We all know Jaden Ivey landed in Detroit with the 5th overall pick. But my question to you is, are you here for this Jaden Ivey, Bennedict Mathurin, Detroit Pistons versus Indiana Pacers beef?
100%. I am a beef enjoyer. Pause.
Yo.
um I think a little competition is always good. I think that especially because you have two guys who were drafted. One was drafted 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mathurin went 6, right, to
Yes.
Indiana. Yeah. So I love having a little competition there, especially because they're both in the same division. Let's get that Pacers Pistons rivalry off the ground a little bit. I just love rivalries in general for the game. I think they're great. Indiana and Milwaukee earlier this season, I thought that was great for the game. Just in general, like you don't get. I feel like we don't get enough beef in basketball, which I guess we'll get to later. We don't get enough beef in the NBA to my liking, because I feel like in sports, people are tribalist by nature. Like guys want to get behind a team and then also hate one other. You know what I mean? Like teams need someone to root against, and if you have something there where it's like this guy doesn't like this guy or this team doesn't like this team, it not only keeps the games exciting. Not to say the game itself isn't exciting, but it keeps things exciting, and it also just kind of gives fans a little bit to hold on to for a little bit, a little banter back and forth, which I always think is positive, unless it gets like super toxic, which there are cases like that. But even something like, you look at like college sports in general, like an Ohio State, Michigan, it gets really serious, and people do not play. Like you can't go in Ohio with a Michigan license plate without getting at least a couple comments, right? So I feel like things like that, sure, they can get toxic, but I think overall, just beef in general in sports, I think it's a good thing. I think it grows the game and it keeps people passionate.
I think the funniest part of the shit talking that Mathurin was doing, like Jaden Ivey didn't even hear him.
Yeah.
And he like looked at him. He's like, "What'd you say?" He's like, "You can't even guard me in an All-Star game." And I kind of find it, or Rising Stars game. I shouldn't say All-Stars.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna get mad that I said that. A Rising Stars game. I find it funny because neither of them could guard each other. They were both giving each other buckets. It just kind of seems like Mathurin still has that chip on his shoulder. He wanted to be a Piston so bad, which, hey, like I'm happy for, but at the same time, it's just like I'm pretty happy with Jaden Ivey with that 5th pick.
Yeah, Pistons fans seem to have kind of. It's weird. I didn't see the. Well, here's my thing. I actually saw this coming a little bit last year. I didn't think it would happen this year, where fans kind of seem to have riled around Jaden Ivey a little bit as like, oh, this is our guy. And I haven't seen as much Cade hype lately, and that's its own discussion. That that's its own thing. But I think Pistons fans are really happy with the Ivy pick. Pacers fans are really happy with the Mathurin pick. So it's just overall good fun. I don't think there's anything too crazy to it.
No, I love it. I kind of want the Pistons Pacers rivalry to kind of rekindle a little bit, because growing up as a kid, like watching Ben Wallace and Ron Artest and Jermaine O'Neal just like go at it, like this. Yeah. I'm a sicko. Like I love, like as a kid, like I love the defense and I love the defensive battles. Like I was there for like the 67, 69 scores. Like I don't want to see no 140, 145.
Yeah, I mean, I personally grew up in the buckets era. I think that's what we're gonna call this, where you get guys like Curry, and I've seen defense get played less and less. But I am definitely a fan of defense. It's just in a Rising Stars game, especially, you're not going to see that much defense getting played, the All-Star game, which is now. Is it now?
I think so. It kind of shows you my give a shit level with this All-Star game. It's been it's like a watered down, just a YMCA game at this point. But
yeah, it's really just pick up hoops. There's nothing to it.
Like honestly, like I'm like I just don't care. Like my interest level is very low. Yeah. Especially with the dunk contest last night. That's a whole nother like I don't even know. Like Kenny Smith's a hater. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Good Lord, man.
Yeah.
He's definitely got the hating uncle vibe, 100%.
For sure.
I don't know if you saw this, and I kind of found it funny because I have a lot of friends that are Knicks fans, and they always would talk shit about Evan Fournier and how they didn't like him.
Yeah.
And I think Mike Curtis was interviewing him, and he basically is like, I'm so excited to be out of New York. So kind of my question to you is, have you been kind of following like the Evan Fournier, Tom Thibodeau, they don't like each other saga?
I have. I actually follow some Knicks fans on Twitter. So I've been like, even before the trade happened where Fournier, Grimes, and Malachi Flynn landed here, I was pretty aware of the Knicks fans' feelings on all of those players, which is why I was a little bit surprised to see Grimes actually end up getting moved. I thought it was going to be one of those things where like player kind of seems like they want out a little bit, but they don't end up getting in. Maybe they end up finding a role, but he actually got moved, which I thought was a great move for Detroit. But Evan Fournier with New York, I always thought that situation was really interesting because when they traded for him, I was like, okay, yeah, they need spacing and they need a guy that can really shoot. He seems like both of those things. Like I know his time in Boston wasn't like the best, but
No.
I didn't think he was like DNP levels, especially considering his contract.
Yeah.
Because it's not like he has some tiny contract. Like that's significant money that you're just not playing. It's worked out in their favor, to be fair. Like they're doing great. But I was surprised a little bit to see that he really truly would not get minutes there because it's not like he's incredibly old either. He's like what 31.
If that, like,
Yeah. So I don't blame Evan for wanting out of New York and being excited to be out of New York. I saw anytime there's Pistons related news or anything like that, and you see it on social media, I'm sure you see it more than anybody. You'll see like, oh, this player's excited to be in Detroit, and then the comment section is just like, nobody's excited to be in Detroit. Anybody, but I genuinely believe he is, and he's been getting opportunities to play. Monty's been playing him quite a bit. Some Pistons fans have mixed opinions on that, and that is what it is. But I can't say he's really performed poorly with the Pistons. I think, you get him in a refined role, and I don't think Pistons fans will have too much to complain about because I really do believe Evan Fournier is still a quality role player in the NBA. He might not be a starting level player on maybe a championship team, but I do think he has a role in the NBA still for sure.
Yeah, I remember him in Orlando, and like he was a pretty good player, but I have a lot of friends that are Magic fans. Like, dude, this guy cannot defend a traffic cone. And like during the trade, I was like, okay, we're trading Bojan, but we're getting a guy that can basically do the same thing.
Yeah.
And you're getting Quentin Grimes, and you get some throw-in players that maybe you want to look at, but you probably won't.
Mm-hmm.
I thought him saying that was really funny, and I saw a bunch of national media bunch-ins like Bleacher Report pick up the story, and they're like, "Oh yeah, who wants to live in Detroit?" Newsflash: these guys don't live in Detroit; they're in Birmingham and like Royal Oak. Like, the only person I know for a fact that lives in Detroit is like Troy Weaver. Like, that's the only like front office, whatever. Like Monty Williams, for all intents and purposes, I know he lives in Birmingham.
Right.
Like, they don't live near Detroit. Like, there's nice parts of Michigan. I just think sometimes people from an outside perspective, they're going to have those opinions. But I mean, there's some really beautiful parts of Michigan that, like, I think maybe people in New York or wherever they are don't even realize it.
Well, that and even Detroit, I wouldn't say it's like it's a bad city at all. I really like if you spend time in downtown Detroit, sure, just like any other major city, there's rough areas and everything like that, sure, but I can't say like Detroit as a whole is in a nice city. Like if there's definitely certain places right near LCA even that there are some apartments, townhomes that are really nice in nice areas. Detroit is not what the national media and a lot of people kind of assume it to be, and that's something I try to tell in stories where I talk to players or coaches or anybody like that, where I kind of always ask people's opinions on Detroit when they first come here, and then I do a little like with Jamel McMillan, who's the Crews head coach. At the beginning of the season, before the season actually, I had asked him kind of what his thoughts were on Detroit, and he was like, it's kind of gloomy, it's this and that. But then the more time goes on, his opinion has evolved, and it's kind of just something that like you really have to be here to have an opinion on the city.
Yeah, I mean, Jamel came from Seattle, so I mean, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
He said gloomy.
He did say, yeah, it reminded him of Seattle, which it was complimentary. I don't want to make it seem like he was crapping.
No, it's kind of funny because like Seattle rains like every day.
Yeah,
that's why I was kind of laughing in my head. I was like,
yeah,
that's actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it's kind of Fournier just wants to play, and he has been playing a lot. Of that Lakers game, it seems like he was like scoring every basket. And I kind of had to turn it off. I was like, I don't know why I'm staying up till 1 a.m. to watch this play the Lakers.
I don't blame you.
I really don't. I think the most important topic of this podcast is why people are probably here. And when I tell you I was half asleep when I get this Shams text because I was catching up on some sleep. And all I see is Detroit Pistons. So in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, they waived Malachi Flynn. Get the sleep out of my eyes. And I'm like, yo, what? Like, what just happened? So allegedly, because I'm going to say allegedly because there's no video evidence.
Right.
Isaiah Stewart punched Drew Eubanks. So my question to you, Zar, is What were your initial thoughts when you saw that Shams tweet and just like the firestorm just on social media of people kind of like saying that Isaiah Stewart has like this history of violence when he really doesn't? I mean, you could pick apart everything from the LeBron James fight. He got elbowed in the head first.
Yeah.
The Draymond Green thing, Draymond Green tried to say he was a punk. He freaking Isaiah Stewart grabbed him, let him know, like, hey, you're not going to be punking my ass around.
Right.
Patrick Beverley this year, messing with him during shoot-arounds and elbowing him. Like, everything with Isaiah Stewart, he's never initiated anything. And, Shams Charania is trying to say it was a play, like, this year, apparently. And I looked up the play, and Isaiah Stewart was nowhere near Drew Eubanks. It was a Killian Hayes fast break point, and this whole thing just doesn't like add up, in my opinion.
Yeah. So with this, as far as my initial reaction, I remember reading it and just being like, here we go, in terms of expecting like a social media, because that's the type of thing that like social media loves to run with, right? Like I remember the whole Bobby Portis Mirotic thing in Chicago. That's the type of thing that people really cling on to. I have a couple of things on this. One, first and foremost, I don't think fights in sports are ever that serious where this needs to be talked about in a legal manner. It needs to be talked about in terms of how it reflects on a team or on an individual. At the end of the day, this is competition. Competition gets really intense. And even though Isaiah wasn't playing, he still is on a basketball team that gets kind of the center of a lot of people's jokes. Like they're the butt of a lot of people's jokes. So a lot of these guys do have chips on their shoulders. They can't show it because of their record. And they're all very aware of the record, how people kind of view them. I don't think fights in the heat of competition, I know it's before the game, but it still is technically during competition. I really don't think it's that serious. I mean, I went to my first Red Wings game like a month ago, and a lot of people thought it was funny because I made some jokes about knowing too much about hockey and stuff. But a lot of people were waiting for a fight in a hockey game, and that's totally normal. That's completely, everybody goes there and like, oh, I hope we get to see a fight today. But it happens in a basketball context, and it's like needs some social commentary behind it. And I'm always just so confused about the discourse when it comes to fighting in basketball. Now, I'm not saying I encourage fighting or I encourage violence or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying I don't think it needs to be this big thing where we turn it into a national discussion about, oh God, this player's going to get suspended this many games and they're out of control and this and that. It's sports, man. If anybody has ever played sports on any level, you totally know that you get your emotions are heightened. You're like, even if you're not playing, your emotions are heightened. And on the NBA level, people talk about you every day. People probably DM you every day. People have accounts dedicated to you, like all those Muse accounts, right? Like, there's so many people that make you the center of attention every single day. There's so many things that go into sports rather than just, oh, this guy walked up to this guy, just started swinging on him. I really think that discourse is a little irresponsible, and it's always been really confusing to me because I feel like we have combat sports. We have the WWE, which imitates like combat, right? Like
Yeah.
we are a country and a society that really just loves a fight. Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, and like half the country was like, hell yeah. Then half the country was kind of giving the same reaction to this, where they're like, oh, that's just out of control, blah, blah, blah. Like, America loves fights, man. Like, that's like kind of the thing. Like, they love conflict, they love debate. That's why it's a show like First Take is a huge thing, because we love conflict.
What was really weird about the reporting is it contradicts itself. So the Suns say it was unprovoked. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, it was unprovoked. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, so that means Stu and the Pistons got off the bus, dropped his bags, and was looking for a fight. It doesn't really seem like his character.
No.
Then they say they were chest to chest. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, he said something disrespectful. He said something that crossed the line. And again, they say, unprovoked. Drew Eubanks didn't do anything. Then he said he sucker punched him. And I'm thinking, how can you be chest to chest with somebody and sucker punch somebody when you have peripheral vision? I was just like, this isn't adding up. They said that we're going to get footage. We don't get footage. They get the police involved, which I think is hilarious, by the way, because what probably happened was they take Isaiah Stewart and they just put him in the back of a room with the security guards. He probably didn't go to jail, most likely, because if you get the police involved, they're probably going to get a call from the commissioner saying like, hey, just let it go. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
I just see a lot of people talking like really wild and irresponsibly with it, especially like I saw Kendrick Perkins, saying that, Isaiah Stewart has anger issues and stuff like that. And I was like, dude, like he doesn't have anger issues. That's just so irresponsible. And even the Sun saying like, it was unprovoked and the Pistons need to get him under control. It's just like, I just don't believe the reporting that came out from the Sun side, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really, I think Monty Williams had said that exact wordage, like it was irresponsible, releasing a statement like that that's so opinionated so soon by a team when there's no facts or footage available, I think is a little irresponsible. Shams is just doing his job when it comes to reporting. I don't blame him for anything like that. But when it comes to like the Suns kind of coming out and saying that, I think it's a little questionable. And I really have an issue when it comes to people talking about Stewart, because the way people talk about Isaiah Stewart, they talk about him like he is some loose cannon maniac who just goes around starting fights. When you look at any conflict he has been in his entire time in the NBA so far, I can go through them. I think the first one I remember was Giannis Antetokounmpo, his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
He was just playing physical. Giannis didn't like it. Giannis came up to him after the game, and that's what kind of got clipped. Okay, I don't really see where he was in the wrong there. You could even look at something like Markieff Morris that same year. It was Markieff who had a problem with Isaiah Stewart playing physical. Keyword playing physical. I don't know. And then, of course, the whole LeBron thing was initiated by LeBron, and I'm a fan of LeBron's. I've been a fan of LeBron's my whole life. I will say he did swing down and hit Stewart in the face. If you get punched in the face, you're going to have a reaction to getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. And then, it's just like, and then we look at something like this, looking at the history of things, it's pretty, responsible to be like, okay, well, I feel like something had to have led to that exact moment where he felt the need to put his hands on him. But Isaiah Stewart is someone who I talked to a lot of Cruise players. I talked to some Pistons, like staff and players. I always hear one of the first few things I always hear is Isaiah Stewart's a leader. I always hear that he's a leader. I always hear that he's someone younger guys go to talk to on this team. Like I think Malcolm Castellan had said that earlier this year when he was asked about, who's really like helped him with the process of becoming a two-way player. Players rave about Isaiah Stewart on this team, and they all kind of look to him for leadership. So for the media and for fans who kind of aren't as aware, to paint him in this light of loose cannon and, really just troubled or anger issues, whatever they're trying to say, I really feel is both irresponsible and just inaccurate, because from all accounts, and I've met Stewart, and he's genuinely like just a even keeled, pretty cool guy. Like he's genuinely just like a good dude. So I really have an issue when people try to make it seem like he's I don't know, like I'm trying to think like of someone who I can even compare. Like they make him out to sound like I mentioned WWE earlier, like they make him out to sound like the Undertaker or something. Like it's like this guy is a real person who's actually really respected and admired by his peers, and his only real thing that gets caught in the national media is that he does. Can I swear? Am I able to swear?
Fuck yeah.
Okay. He doesn't take shit from people. Like that's really it. He doesn't seem to take shit from people. I didn't know that standing up for yourself really made you an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about like a lot of like the altercations. Like I remember when Blake was screwing with them. He was screwing with Sadiq.
Yeah.
And Isaiah Stewart was sticking up for his teammate. I mean, you could go down the list of every altercation he's ever had.
Yeah.
And I think the one most recently outside of the Eubanks one was the Pat Beverly one this year.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Pat Beverly was saying that, Stewart had people calling him saying he was looking for him like the day before. And I was just like, I highly doubt that. You're probably just trying to get clicks for Barstool Sports. Because personally, like, no disrespect, I've never really listened to Pat Bev's podcast. Like, I'm not trying to be like rude or anything, but
it's a good pod. I won't lie. It's definitely a good pod.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've listened to it. There's just so many. Like,
yeah,
I
that's
heard,
true.
I've heard Gilbert Arenas talk about like this whole situation, and like he was pretty disrespectful with it.
Well, Gilbert already kind of has it out for Stewart a little bit, so I don't know if he's the really best guy to talk about this situation.
Yeah, he basically said he was too dumb to read his post. He's like, you're not gonna tell someone that's dumb. I was like, dude, come on, stop. Really?
Yeah, that's really like stuff I have an issue with. Like, there's really no need for all of that because it's you're feeding into kind of stereotypes and just generalizations, and I'm really just not with that.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity to go on a live stream, and I don't think I told anyone this. He's partnered with a company called like Revel Moments or something like that, and I was just a spectator. I didn't ask any questions. I just listened in. And the amount of, I'm talking about like elementary kids, like little kids, like he had kids from Rochester, New York, coming on in that he sponsors. He's even got kids that he sponsors with the Jalen Rose Foundation. And like they were actually like asking him basketball questions. And I know the Pistons PA announcer,
John Mason.
Kevin.
Kev knows. Kev knows. Yeah.
Kev knows. He hosted the whole thing. Like, you could go and ask him. Like, he takes time with these kids, like these little kids, and he doesn't have to. He's a really good human being at the end of the day. I've never met him on a personal level, but people that I've interviewed through this podcast, whether it's you, whether it's Corey, James, they all speak really high of his character. So when I see stuff like this and kind of like unprovoked, I was like, man, that does not sound like him. Like something disrespectful was definitely said.
For sure. Like it takes two to tango at the end of the day. Like the last thing I guess I'll leave with on Stewart was like, and you mentioned the kids. I remember I did this story about Ezekiel. If those who read it, it's Ezekiel he was going through some tough times. Essentially, you can read our story. I'll save the details, but Isaiah Stewart wasn't told to go and fist bump Ezekiel, who was just kind of able to sit courtside for some warm-ups. But he came up to Ezekiel and gave him a fist bump and talked to him for a couple of minutes. And that's one of my favorite like pictures I've ever taken was him fist bumping Ezekiel, because Ezekiel just looks starstruck. He's just Stu's just a good dude. And I know that with conflict and with fights comes discourse, and that's totally normal, but I just hate when things get ran with and people just start running with generalizations.
Yeah, like I said, I sat back, I observed. I didn't want to be one of those people that was just talking recklessly, because at the end of the day, the guy has a family. He's trying to support. He's trying to better himself. And like I said, I see national media pundits just say some really reckless, dumbass shit. Like the whole Inside NBA crew just sounded like a bunch of dumbasses. And
I actually haven't even said that. I haven't even seen that clip.
Oh, I think Brian Windhorst was probably worse than Kendrick Perkins. Just kind of talking like, oh yeah, he's had a history of violence. I was like, dude, shut up.
Yeah,
really?
It's just, it gets really weird when discourse starts about stuff like this.
Yeah, I don't blame any of these NBA players not watching anything ESPN or Fox Sports related, because some of these guys just say some wild, crazy ass shit. Yeah, but we can leave it at that. I did want to talk about it a little bit. I wanted to kind of just give my thoughts and feelings about it, because like I said, he's one of my favorite players. Like I said, I like guys that do good for the community and spend time with, anybody that not good for it. Next thing I wanted to talk about is someone that I think a lot of Pistons fans are familiar with. and that is Chauncey Billups. So if you guys didn't see the news, Chauncey Billups was named a finalist for the Naismith Hall of Fame. So my question to you, and I don't know how old you were during the 04 run, but do you have a favorite Chauncey Billups moment?
So that is kind of the thing for me. I was born July 2002, which means when we won the finals, I was about a year and 11 months.
Okay.
So I wasn't really conscious at that point. But, and this is really sad, my very first memory of Chauncey that I can remember, I want to say it was was Chauncey on the team where LeBron just absolutely took over in overtime?
Yeah.
And then that playoff matchup.
2007.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was still here.
That would be my first memory. So it's not like the best memory. That's not the best memory. But one of the best things about growing up in the era that I did is having access to YouTube. Because I have access to the internet and I've had access to things like YouTube. So Ben Wallace was my favorite player growing up, and I really only watched him as a Piston that I can remember, in like years that I can remember. From like, I remember that 2007 season a little bit, and I remember his second stint in Detroit. But most of my love for Ben Wallace came from YouTube, and the same way a lot of my love for Chauncey, Rip, those guys came from YouTube, because I would just watch their highlights. I'd watch sometimes they would get taken down, but there'd be some full games on YouTube that you could find here and there, not encouraging piracy for the NBA's sake. In case anybody hears that, I did watch games on YouTube, and I would just be like, wow, like I thought Chauncey was the best point guard possible for that team. And then I also enjoyed watching him in Denver, which I know is kind of a sore subject for Pistons fans. But I remember I did enjoy watching him in Denver, and I remember his second stint here as well. I remember even those Clippers years, and I really remember his jersey retirement, because I want to say I was in attendance for that. And I remember my little brother, got to take a picture with Chauncey on the jersey retirement day, which was really cool. So Chauncey's a really cool guy. I've met him once. I want to say I met him once. I also met some other like Pistons legends that day just by pure coincidence. I was like 12 years old. But yeah, shout out to Chauncey, and shout out to shout out to Vince Carter as well. I hope they both get their flowers.
Yeah, the fact that he even made the Hall of Fame, I thought was really cool. I think it's well deserved too.
For sure.
I'm just gonna show my age, because I feel like I want to say a little bit older than you. But I was 12 when they won the championship in 04. Okay. So I grew up on the Teal era, the Grant Hill era.
Yeah.
So I'd probably say my favorite moment was him, just winning the finals MVP and making Gary Payton look like he was 60 years old.
Yeah.
Chauncey was great, man. Like, I'm happy for him. We're pretty pro piracy over here, by the way, too. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I literally have a doc of like probably 50 piracy sites if one of them goes down. Because I'm not gonna be paying for League Pass, but apparently it was like free this week. And, like NBA University broke the internet.
Yeah, it was like some Jason Tatum thing, right?
Yeah. It was like Tatum shoes, like NBA University. Shout to him, does a really good job of stats and stuff like that. But broke the internet with League Pass. But I'm happy for Chauncey. It'd be really cool to see not only Ben Wallace, but him also make the Hall of Fame as well. Like having two guys that I think a lot of Pistons fans during like the go in the work era, like I think for a majority, most people like really love Ben Wallace or they really love Chauncey, but there are also some like small individuals like, oh no, like I fuck with Tayshaun Prince. Like,
shout out to the Rip Hamilton truthers.
Yeah, Rip Hamilton too. Like shit, man. Like one of the guys I used to do a podcast with, I swear I thought we were gonna get canceled. He's like, yeah, Rip Hamilton was the weakest link on the 04 team. I was wow. Say that again, man. Swear to God. But shout out to Chauncey for being a finalist if he does make the Hall of Fame, I'll be really happy for him.
sure. Shout out
So
Chauncey.
we're going to talk about some current Pistons. And I'll say one of the key players on the Detroit Pistons is Cade Cunningham. And I saw a quote from James, and to me, I'm the king of overreaction.
Okay.
So I overreact to everything. And he said he has good and bad days with his leg. So my question to you would be is, when you see a quote like this from Cade Cunningham, and we know he sat out all last year with that shin leg injury, are you starting to get concerned with Cade Cunningham's health long term?
I don't know about long term. I think with any player, and I saw James said this as well, when any player kind of deals with an injury that takes significant time out, the healing process is in waves. You know, like first it's going to be very lengthy, but then there'll be times where they, like he said, there's good and bad days. I can't say I'm overly concerned when it comes to his health because his play, I know he hasn't been putting up like the 40-point games that he was a couple months ago, but he's still playing at a pretty productive level. And I think it's something to monitor for sure. Like it's absolutely something to monitor that, you know, maybe he is getting a little bogged down by injuries, but I really don't think it's anything too concerning right now. If he was to miss the rest of the season, then yes, absolutely, I would say that's a concern. But if he's just having a little process where, you know, maybe he has to sit out on a back-to-back, then I don't think it's too big of a deal. Or if it's something where he rests like maybe one game a week and he's still overall healthy and it's not going to impact his long-term health, I don't think it's anything Pistons fans should be too concerned about in general. I feel like his play overall is pretty good. Like even a Cade bad game, I watch with my dad a lot of times when I'm not like covering the games in person. And my dad is like a big Cade guy, right? And he mentioned like he's like even a bad Cade game, he almost had like a triple double, and I want to say that was like the Lakers or Clippers game. I can't remember which one. Because I remember, just like my brother also is kind of he's a big Pistons fan. He was like, "Oh man, Cade's not looking at like good today." And then my dad goes, "Well, you know, he's almost got a triple double, and this is like a quiet game for him." So I feel like for Cade, the talent is just unquestionable, right?
Yeah.
The health is, I guess, maybe the question for some people, but I don't think it's too concerning for me right now. I think Pistons fans maybe could be concerned if he misses significant time once again. But I mean, he dealt with a little knee injury, and it takes a little bit to get back. Now, I feel like moving past All-Star break, he should be playing more consistently, and you know that process should be a lot more smooth. But I can't say I'm too concerned.
Yeah, I just see fans' comments, and I think the one glaring comment that I always see is health with him. And I can understand it from a fan's perspective. Now, maybe they're not watching all 82 games. Maybe they just see the injury report because maybe they're just like a fantasy basketball guy. Who knows?
Right.
I was a little concerned because he sat out all last year and had a major surgery.
Right.
And someone had left a comment. I think it was Red Baron. He said Cade was icing his knees earlier this season, which is strange because I didn't know he had knee issues. The only thing I'll say to that is all NBA players ice their body if you go to the game. Like they got the ice packs out there. And they might not even be sore. They just, want some relief.
Yep.
If he comes back from All-Star break and he's still a little bit sluggish and he's still not like putting up those, like getting back to the, putting up those 30, 40 point games. And I think then as a Piston fan, you should be a little bit concerned if he's still having those issues. But I think, sitting 2 weeks out, you kind of lose I always tell people that watch this podcast, like you can be in shape, but are you in basketball shape?
Right.
Because it's completely different. I think Cade just got out of basketball shape. I think once he gets back into basketball shape, he'll get back to that form where, he's giving you like 23-7 a night.
Right.
But like I said, I did want to bring it up because I do see a lot of people, like I said, they overreact. I think a lot of Pistons fans and myself, we're very like-minded. Like we overreact to any little thing. Like
for sure.
Like Jalen Duren's like not wearing a sleeve. Now he's wearing an armband with the number 0. Like,
yeah.
I was like, hey, he's putting up more points with the arm sleeve than the armband. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of the talk with Cade is so interesting because when he's healthy, people are like, he's an all-star. He deserves a max contract, blah, blah, blah. This is the Pistons' number one option or the future. I don't know why anybody would ever question Cade. And then the same people, the minute he has a stretch of like 4 or 5 games where he can even put up like just 25 and 7 or something. And they go, oh man. Yeah, I think Cade's just a Robin, guys. Like, I feel like we don't have a Batman yet. Like, I feel like he's just a sidekick and this and that. It's so inconsistent that, like, there's been this whole discourse of, does Cade deserve a max contract? Does he not deserve a max contract? I wouldn't pay it. I feel like it's not even a question of if he deserves a max contract, but I would like for the talk to remain consistent at least, because if you're gonna say Cade's the guy for the Pistons and he's gonna lead them into the future, you can't be just a couple weeks later being like, oh yeah, no, I'm not gonna give him the max. Like I'd like for it to stay consistent.
It's so funny you said that because someone actually asked a question about that, and it was Derek saying like, "Are you comfortable giving Cade the max this season?"
Yeah,
5 for 20, 5 for 225. In your opinion, like, yeah, I would feel fine giving him the max. I already know Cade is getting the max, just given the Pistons history with bad. I'm not gonna say this is a bad contract by any means, but I mean, you can go back, and the same people that have given contracts like an Andre Drummond contract are still in the front office. You got guys like when we traded for Reggie Jackson and everyone was like freaking out. They're like, I can't believe we gave Reggie Jackson $80 million. Like right now, that's like a freaking bargain if you get a guy for $20 million.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with getting Cade the max because to me, I think his talent over a 5-year period, like a rookie scale max, it's not that big of a deal, especially with the CBA going up, Derek.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, if he's injured and he's in and out of the lineup and he can't play more than 50 games a season, then you can have those conversations. But for right now, I think most Pistons fans would be willing to keep Cade Cunningham to give him that max rookie extension. Just wanted to kind of talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, to add on to that just a little bit, I feel like Cade is someone who will undoubtedly get that contract, and I feel like it is deserved. I mean, right now he's not as explosive, right? But like, it's a really small sample of games compared to the amount of games where he overall has looked really good. And when you consider the age, you consider the fact that this is technically his second season, I really feel like it's no question. He was the number 1 pick. He is this team's franchise guy, whether some people like it or not. He is the franchise guy. And it's the way it is. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's actually a great thing if this team has a guy who they believe in enough that they are comfortable giving him a 5-year, $225 million. I think that's a great sign for the direction of this team. I know they're not great right now, but I think the direction of this team, the fact that you can have a guy who I think will be 22 when he signs that contract this offseason, you have a 22-year-old that's worth that much, means you're doing something right. I know that like overall the direction of this team this season has been really poor. I'm very aware, but think about the context of the Pistons just a couple years ago where your young guys were not getting second contracts. I mean, Isaiah Stewart, we talked about him earlier, was the first Piston draft pick in the first round to receive a second contract since Andre Drummond. It has been that long. So the fact that you have a guy on your team who's young and is worth a max is a great sign. Now, if you can just build a team around him and get a system around him that really works, that's perfect. That's great. But I think it's not something that Pistons fans, the discourse kind of just has to end because it's happening one way or another. And I also know that Cade, I know this for a fact, Cade is someone who's really valued around the league. And let's just say, hypothetically, that the Pistons and Cade were to, just like, all right, well, like maybe we want to move in another direction. I know for a fact earlier this season, Now, I'm not the Pistons did not entertain this at all. This Cade is very much their franchise guy, but the Pistons did get offers for Cade. They turned them down very quickly because Cade's untouchable. He's their number one guy. But the offers they got were pretty substantial. So Cade is a guy who's not only valued across the league, he's valued within this organization. And I feel like if he continues on this course, there's nothing to worry about in terms of contract. And I don't think, for the context of getting clipped, I hope people realize I'm not saying he's going to ever get traded or anything like that. I'm strictly just saying that in the context of he's extremely valued across this league. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard similar things to what you were saying, and to even add more context, I mean, the Houston Rockets were willing to move on from Jalen Green this year. Like, that's the number 1 and number 2 overall picks from a few years ago.
Right.
And they're valuable players. I think sometimes when Pistons fans watch Cade Cunningham, they kind of feel underwhelmed in a sense because he's not like that uber athletic guy. He's more of a methodical player that kind of plays at a slower pace. And he, like I said, he's not like a Jaden Ivey, for example, where Jaden Ivey, I feel like, could be on SportsCenter every night with a highlight dunk or something crazy like that. But I do think the Pistons, value him. I've told people on this podcast, he's your franchise player. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, he's your franchise player. And I'm glad you brought up the Andre Drummond thing because, like, I was looking back, like, the last 10, Detroit Pistons draft picks, and I was just like, man, this is no wonder we're in the shit that we're in right now. Like, we just did not draft well under Van Gundy and Joe Dumars. But I know Pistons fans are always going to have kind of like criticism with Cade Cunningham, and it's understandable because they haven't won a whole lot under like the Cade Cunningham era since they did draft him. But at the end of the day, that has more to do with the front office and what you're building around him. Like, Joe Harris is not going to help like Cade Cunningham for all intents and purposes. Like, you actually have to get him some players that complement his game and not make his life more difficult.
For sure.
This is another Cade question, and I mean, I've had debates about this.
Okay, here we go.
So he said, this comes from Organic Lindell. Shout out to him. He said, do you think this coach or this organization will realize a heliocentric style of play from Cade is not getting us the best results?
You want me to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
I think a lot of times when Cade will miss a game or two, and let's say the Pistons pick up a win, right? Because this did happen earlier this season, not too long ago. Cade was out for a little bit, and the Pistons won 1 or 2 games. And people go, oh, man, the Pistons are better without Cade. They don't need Cade. And I can't understand that in the slightest, because it's so clear that if you watch these games, Cade is not the issue. He has never been the issue, right? It's more so how he's used. And I'm not, necessarily knocking Monty because, that's not what I'm here to do. But, it's a thing where Cade is focused. I'm going to use Blake Griffin as an example. They kind of use him in the exact same way that they used Blake Griffin back in 2018-19, where Blake kind of had to initiate all the offense, and then he was the center of all the offense. And defenses come into every single game, and they will tell you this after the game. They'll go, yeah, Cade's number 1 in our scouting report. And the game goes strictly through Cade. So I do agree. The heliocentric style of play definitely will not get the best results right now because you're not really giving him any help. If they can just balance an Ivy-Cade dynamic, they can really just find that next level where they actually start winning games. I think right now is maybe just kind of an awkward figuring it out period because in the beginning of the season, Cade, the starting lineup with Cade was changing so often where it was Killian and then it'd be Kevin Knox and Isaiah Livers and whatever. But now is the time where they're kind of really rolling with Cade and Ivy. This second half of the season should really let you know what you have in terms of Cade and Ivy as a duo, and also in terms of just as individual players as well. I think it's not a reflection of Cade that if a heliocentric style of play doesn't necessarily produce the best results. I think it's more just a result of not necessarily knowing how to get everybody to maximize their potential in a lineup or in a system. Because if you can just figure out, okay, Cade is here, and then we'll get Ivy on the ball a little more to reduce pressure, that changes so much. So I feel like it's not Cade really that's an issue.
Yeah, I kind of think it's coaching too in rotations at the end of the day, because I know you had mentioned that, like, you have Killian Hayes that was in the starting lineup to start the season. Even Alec Burks started a couple of games, and you had Kevin Knox.
Yeah.
I think my biggest issue with the heliocentric style of play is this just has nothing to do with Cade. It's the other four guys around him. When Cade has the ball, they just stand there. And it'll be, like you said, they trap him, they double him, and then that's what causes the turnovers. I think for, Cade Cunningham to be your point guard, you need a lot of body movement and player movement.
Yeah.
You need to be setting a lot of dribble handoffs, a lot of pick and rolls to really make it work. Kind of like how they were using him in Team USA this summer. I think if you use him in that style of play, then it can work. I've talked with people on this podcast about, hey, maybe you move him off ball, because Cade Cunningham's versatile enough where you could slot him in at shooting guard. Maybe you want to have Jaden Ivey with the ball in his hands more. They can split the time. It doesn't have to be, well, Jaden Ivey's the point guard. No, we're going to move Cade to shooting guard. I think they're both versatile and talented enough to where whoever's hot that night, take the ball and you take over. Yeah. I mean, Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars did that, and they won 2 back-to-back championships.
Right.
If they can do it, I'm pretty sure those two can do it. I'm not comparing the two, by the way. Right. I'm not comparing the two before someone's like, oh, look at Pistons Talk said. What an idiot.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the talent is off the charts. Both Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey are so talented and versatile that they can figure it out. It's up to Troy Weaver to get them competent NBA players. And I want to transition into the deadline.
Yeah.
Because we didn't even talk about that, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, who's been your favorite player that Troy Weaver did trade for so far this deadline?
Yeah. Quickly off of that last subject, I think just one thing that came to mind is you look at someone like Luka Doncic, right, who's been using a really heliocentric style. He's got Kyrie Irving next to him, who also kind of demands the ball a little bit. And that pairing has really worked very well this year. So I don't think heliocentric is necessarily the issue there. And honestly, I don't even think the quality of the players that were on this team before was ever an issue. I think it was more so just the fit in general. The fit was a big issue for this team. And it was something that, like, Bojan's not a bad player. Isaiah Livers, I know he didn't have the best year. He's not a bad player. Marvin Bagley's not a bad player. Alec Burks isn't a bad player, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just the fact that, like, these pieces didn't fit. It's like, I said this on Koo's Locked On podcast. I had said it's kind of just like wearing an outfit, and just, sure, the clothes you're wearing are technically nice. It just doesn't go together. And it's kind of the same thing. So moving that to the deadline, I feel like someone like Simone Fontecchio, I think it's how you say Simone Fontecchio. There we go. I think he's not necessarily, I don't think he's like leaps and bounds better than Bojan Bogdanovic. I don't even know if he is better than Bojan Bogdanovic. I would just say that he's a better fit than Bojan Bogdanovic. The fact that he is able to crash the boards a little bit, the fact that he's able to play defense and guard perimeter players and actively, like, stop them from scoring sometimes is a huge improvement over something like Bojan, who's kind of on 2 bad calves a little and is really out there just to get buckets, which is fine. There's totally a role for that in the NBA, but on a team that really needs both defense and shooting, it's hard to look at someone like Bojan and go, okay, well, go defend Kawhi Leonard. Like, you can't really expect that too well. So I'd say Simone has been the biggest addition so far. I'm really looking forward to what Quentin Grimes has to offer on the court. I think his fit on paper is great with this team. He kind of provides something a little bit similar to Asar in terms of defense. But the difference is, and this isn't a knock on Asar, I'm sure his shot will get there eventually. It took a while to get going in overtime elite as well. But Quentin can shoot right now. Like he's shown the ability to shoot throughout his career. So it's not something that I'm really too worried about for Asar long term. But I think for right now, if you plugged Quentin Grimes kind of into that 3 position and you put Simone at the 4, you could have a pretty spaced out starting 5 where you could maybe even, I was going to say you could go 5 out, but Duran's probably not going out. But you could be able to space the floor a little bit more is my point. And you could also be able to defend the ball a lot better and space the floor, which is really the thing that this team was looking to do in the beginning of the season. And they were kind of idealizing a little bit, like ideally Bojan can guard this guy, or ideally Asar can shoot. But now you have guys who kind of are proven on both ends to be at least capable. Not saying they're all-star level or, like incredible, but the fact that they're capable and that they're proven is just enough to kind of give you a blueprint of what your team should look like moving forward.
Yeah, I think you said a lot there, and I'm going to try to,
yeah, my bad.
Try to break it down the best I can.
Yeah.
I think what you said about, I think it's Simone Fontecchio. I saw James call him Tech 19, which I was like, okay, James, you finally got a nickname down pat. Let's go.
That's a good one. It's a really good one for sure.
Wasn't feeling Mr. Chimney, but I'll mess with Tech 19. Apparently they were calling him Tech in Utah, but the Tech 19 just sounds like badass. Like I'd definitely buy a T-shirt that said Tech 19. I think what even Troy mentioned it in his presser, saying like we got a younger version of Bojan that can defend a little bit, and I think he saw that. Like, if you run Fontecchio off the 3-point line, he's going to put the ball on the floor and try to get to the basket. He's a lot more aggressive than Bojan ever was, and that's no shot at Bojan. Bojan's like 34, going on 35.
Right.
And to your point, yeah, those caps are shot. Like I give him maybe another year, playing in the NBA because you can just tell it's just all the wear and tear that he had here really did a number on him. Like 100%. With the Grimes thing you had mentioned, I watched a lot of his highlights, even went back and watched some games on League Pass. He's got so much, the way he cuts, it reminds me a lot of Hamidou Diallo. Just his like the way, because I love Tommy. I thought he was the best cutter on the team. But the way Grimes can cut around the basket and just make himself available when his shot isn't falling, I think is something that the Pistons really don't have. I know Asar is pretty good at cutting as well. But to your point, Asar's 3-point shot, no knock on him. It's just not there yet. Like I said, that was a knock on him coming out of the draft. Both the Thompson twins weren't really known for the 3-point shooting, and we expected that. Right. I think Grimes can at least, you can plug him in, whether you want to start him or come off the bench, and he can provide 3-point shooting. He's a scrappy defender, and he's just going to put up points, whether it's, driving to the basket, hitting threes, backdoor cuts, playing the passing lanes. That's why I was really surprised that the Knicks actually did, involve him in a deal. And he was even surprised that he got traded in that deal.
Right.
But I can't wait to see him. I don't know when we're going to see him. I think some people said after the All-Star break possibly, but I think Fontecchio and Grimes to me are the two players that I really have my eye on. I don't really know what to think of Troy Brown Jr. because he's wearing
mention him.
Yeah, he's wearing the cursed number 7.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, like that first game, which was what, Portland?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. That first game against Portland, he looked like he could really help out on defense. Was it Portland or the Clippers game? Might have which one or the other. He looked pretty good, and he's someone who's had a role in the NBA. Granted, he's not, like I said, an all-star or anything like that, but he has proven himself to be a capable 3-and-D player, which is exactly what this team needs. They don't. Like they can go and try and get a big time player in the offseason, but for now, just having someone who can space the floor and play defense is a big addition, and it really can help show you what you want your future to look like. And I even liked a couple of the comments he made after a game where he had just mentioned something, I think to Cade, where he was going off of 1 foot or something like that. And I thought that was just like great leadership. I know Troy Brown's only like 24, maybe 25. But the fact that he's, experienced enough to kind of give that advice is a huge addition. So I think he's been a good help as well.
Yeah, I mean he's what we thought Isaiah Livers was going to be this year, and I was pretty high on Isaiah Livers coming out this year. I don't know. John Beeline quit and he forgot how to shoot. I just don't know what happened there, but wish Livers well in DC. I'm trying to think. There's someone else that I'm forgetting. I think it's Jake Milton. And he didn't shoot in Minnesota like at all. And like he comes here, I think the last game against the Lakers, like he had a couple like 4-point plays and like his shot looks pretty decent, looks pretty good. My only thing, what I don't like about that is now Sasser's minutes are getting decreased again.
I think Sasser's someone they're trying to prioritize a little bit with his development in the second half of the season. I can't see Shake really cutting into it too much. I mean, we never know, right? But I want to say that he's someone who this team really prioritizes and can see as a valuable piece moving forward. Like I've said it constantly since probably summer league, even before. I wasn't extremely familiar with Sasser in the pre-draft process, so he was someone I kind of looked at afterwards. And I really noticed the one thing I kept saying is like he's like a winning player, because you know how some players are just kind of winning players. Like you think of like your Marcus Smarts, guys like that, who are just kind of winning players. They make winning plays. They bring a winning mentality. I feel like Marcus Sasser is one of those players, and I want to believe that Troy Weaver in the front office in general sees that as well. So I'd like to say that his minutes probably should continue to maintain, or if not increase.
Yeah, I'm just hoping for Monty Williams' sake that he's trying to get a look at all these guys, and it's because I think you trade up to get this guy. He should be playing at least 20 minutes a night. Just in my opinion. I mean, you have 8 wins on the season. You're not making the playoffs.
Right.
I think you can still evaluate and play your young guys. I know he's kind of cooled off a little bit from shooting from the outside and just shooting in general, but he's a guy I look at and I see so much Terry Rozier and a little bit of Tyrese Maxey, and I get excited when I watch him play because he's just so shifty with his handle.
Yeah. Yeah, he's one of the few guys who's like really like a big bag. He has a huge bag on this team.
Right.
My brother is a huge fan of Sasser, so constantly like he'll just text me and be like, he's literally going to be Tyrese Maxey. I'm like, I don't know about all that, but I do see like the semblances of those players for sure. I do see like a little Brandon Jennings in his game for sure. So I definitely can see him being a valuable piece for this team moving forward. I wrote in the preseason that I thought he would. I didn't say he would take Ivey's starting spot, but I did say I thought he would give him some competition, which did happen a little bit, although he wasn't the one starting in place of Ivey. I've been pretty high on Sasser, and I believe even though he's an older rookie, I don't think that really limits his potential.
No, it's just sometimes you look at the I call it the iPod shuffle rotations because that's what it feels like with Monty. He just hits the shuffle button. Like I said, I'm dating myself because I had an iPod shuffle. You literally hit the shuffle button and you didn't have a screen. This is before like iPods had a screen. You just hit the shuffle button and then it's like a random song. That's what Monty Williams rotations feel like sometimes. You just hit the shuffle button.
Yeah, no, it is definitely inconsistent. And I mean, I can't necessarily blame him too much sometimes because a lot of times, like if guys aren't making their shots, like you kind of have to switch it up a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely unpredictable.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like because high school coaches do this all the time. They like do the all bench lineup. And I was just like, bro, you're gonna put an all bench lineup with Kawhi Leonard and James Harden out there.
Yeah, that the all bench lineups are definitely. I think they've only worked probably a handful of times. I would like to think eventually they start moving away from those a little bit and stagger a little more, which is something I know fans have been really clamoring for, is staggering minutes for Cade and Ivey, so at least one of them is out there. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I saw Monty Williams. It is because I covered his son's high school game, and that was kind of random. I didn't expect to see him, and then I saw the Wayne Casey today.
Okay.
Watching, I was like, man, I'm seeing a lot of like former like Pistons. Like I saw Pat Garrity. I was like, dude, what the hell's going on? Like, why are there so many like former Pistons watching high school hoops? But it was actually kind of funny. Do you have time for some Q&A questions for people like watching live?
Sure.
Okay. There was one. don't really know where you're at with Troy Weaver as like a general manager. I know some fans, especially after the deadline, they're like, "Oh, let Troy cook." That was kind of like the what I saw on Twitter. But we had a question from C. Harris asking, "Do you believe that Troy Weaver is in the hot seat?"
This is a tricky question because it's a yes and no. I believe there is pressure on Troy Weaver to get not only a better team next season, but a team that will win games, because that's like a huge part of it, right? Like, is actually winning games, not just winning a deadline, not just winning a draft night, winning games. And it hasn't happened so far. And for that reason, there is pressure for sure. Would I say his job is currently in jeopardy? I wouldn't say that right now. The way things are shaking, he made a lot of moves at the deadline. He either had to, and this isn't based on reporting or anything like that, this is just, logic. He either had to sell and get rid of all the veterans and try to maximize their value, or he had to buy and go and get a bigger player, which could have happened with Levine, right? I feel like if the surgery didn't happen, that was pretty close. But he went full sale mode, and you can complain about some of the returns. Like, I know some people wanted a first round pick back for Boyan. I'm sorry, that wasn't going to happen this year. Last year, you probably could have gotten that, but this year, it's just not reality. Everybody knows he's not 100% healthy, and he's kind of a liability on defense. It's just how it is. So I think Troy did enough to where he not bought himself time, because I felt like if he just made some moves at the deadline that kind of shook up the team a little bit, he would have the ability to kind of have the offseason to cook, per se. So I think after this offseason, that's when you can really go and say, okay, Weaver is or isn't on the hot seat. Because I think this offseason is, and I know it's been said before, like last offseason was supposed to be really important. Granted, they did get a huge head coach with a huge contract, but this offseason really is do or die for Weaver. If he doesn't do well, I can't imagine him doing another offseason where, okay, guys, we're going to try it again. This offseason, he kind of has to go out there and be aggressive. And you saw him be aggressive at the deadline, and it's kind of just setting up things to be aggressive in the offseason.
Yeah, I think his comments, I don't know if you got to watch it, but his comments after the trade deadline saying that he's the man for this job, and I was just like, oh, okay. Like, just, nut up and put your balls on the table. Like, shit, all right. Yeah. Like, damn, all right.
Yeah.
I like that. But I think he made a lot of, like, if you listen to it, he owned up on his mistakes. Mm-hmm. Like, he owned up and saying, like, yeah, I think, paying Bagley $12 million was a mistake. And the fact that he did that, I actually gained a lot of respect for him, because some GMs can just be so stubborn and saying, like, this is why I did this. And if they do get questioned by the media, they're kind of snarky about it. And he wasn't really too snarky about it. Like, he was, talking to, the Pistons beat. And like, they're asking him about Killian Hayes. And they're like, why didn't Killian Hayes work out? He's like, well, he didn't work on his shooting. I told him to work on his shooting for 4 years. He didn't do it. I think when I hear comments like that, him saying, like, I'm the man for this job, basically tells me I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to get a contract extension, basically.
I mean, he already got one, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about another one. Like,
okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I think what he's sold Tom Gores and company is patience, and probably sold him, you've never had a young core like this since you've owned the team. And I know it hasn't translated the wins, but I think this summer is going to be very crucial on how he builds it, where he targets it, how he spends the money, whether that's free agency or trades. I think his seat is warm. I don't think it's hot.
Yeah.
Because if he comes out and has another season like this, you best believe Tom Gores isn't going to be too happy with it.
Right.
I just think some fans are just kind of frustrated that it's like year 4 to rebuild, and
I mean, understandably so. Like, I don't blame fans for being upset at all. I totally get it. I just feel like Weaver has this offseason to really prove himself, and if he does, that's great. He'll probably be the man for this job. But if he doesn't, then it's probably over.
This next question is kind of the piggyback off of, is Weaver on the hot seat. This comes from Ryan. He wants to know your thoughts on free agency. Anyone that you would have in mind?
That is a great question. It's not like a loaded free agency class, right? Like, there's not like there could potentially be a LeBron James available, but like, let's be realistic, not necessarily a Detroit Pistons target. The only way that could ever even hypothetically possibly and very unlikely happen is if the Pistons ended up with Bronny. But even then, I feel like it's probably not likely. The big fish in question in terms of free agency signings would be Tobias, right? Like, it's clear that they're very linked to him. Everybody's pretty aware of this. Tobias is someone who I've heard has mutual interest. I know James reported the same thing, where there's mutual interest in a return to Detroit. And ideally, again, I know that's kind of been the phrasing, like, ideally, this is going to work. Ideally, he's that perfect stretch four that, this team really desperately has missed since Jeremy Grant. And I think the fit is definitely good. It's just a question of, is he worth $40 million, right? And I know some people don't want to pay him that. Some people do want to pay him that. Regardless, this team needs to go out and get somebody. And I think it's very likely that they're going to pursue Tobias. That doesn't mean they're going to sign him necessarily, but I think they're going to pursue him. But I also look at the trade market for who their big splash could be, because I don't necessarily think like the Levine talks are completely dead. Like, I think there's a possibility like they could revisit that, and I don't think his value's increased a ton, so I think it'd be kind of easy for them to go out and maybe get a Zach LaVine and sign a lower tier role player as like that stretch four, excuse me. It's just I think it's more likely that the Pistons work the trade market this summer in terms of finding that missing piece than going out and signing somebody. And the only person I can really see them aggressively pursuing that's sort of a bigger name is Tobias Harris. OG Anunoby's kind of out the window, right? Because everybody's pretty certain he's going to stay in New York. Same with Siakam in Indiana. So I would look at, like, some teams are also probably going to have to make some hard decisions in terms of cap space, because that second apron's hitting. A new CBA comes into effect. Someone like Karl Anthony Towns might become available. Like, stuff like that is something I think the Pistons could get involved in. Someone like a Brandon Ingram or a Zion Williamson. Like one of those players. Not saying that they're going to land them, but I think that's what they should probably be looking at.
It's so funny, the three players that you named. I talked with Corey last week, and Corey's been on the Brandon Ingram trade since like October. He's just like, man, that doesn't work out. Like, he's a free agent in 2025.
Right.
Pelicans have a shitload of money invested into a core that hasn't won them anything.
Yeah.
Yet. Like, they haven't won a championship. Like, maybe Zion's available. But
right.
Probably don't want to bring Zion to Detroit.
Yeah.
Ingram, I think, would just be a bona fide star, but I think the Pelicans would try to, if it came to trade talks, they'd probably want the farm for Brandon Ingram, and I think it would cost a whole lot. The LaVine stuff, I think you're spot on. They probably will revisit it, because it seemed like they were really close and he elected for surgery. I mean, that was the report, but we don't really know that to be true for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned a lower tier player last week, and damn near they wanted to cut my head off for it. I mentioned Andrew Wiggins.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought he's a lower tier guy. Golden State is going to be in cap space hell. I don't think the Pistons are going to try to target older Klay Thompson, but
Right.
hey, like
You
they
never know.
could
Yeah.
like stylistically it makes sense.
Right.
Get Cade the shooter he needs. I don't know.
Right.
I think they're going to be more active in the trade market because they're putting all their eggs in one basket with not only Tobias Harris, but like Miles Bridges as well. And I know some Pistons fans are, it's a very touchy subject, and I 100% understand it, the off the court stuff. I'm not going to get into that because I think it's irresponsible to even speak on it because I don't know anything about it. But as a basketball standpoint, I think it makes sense stylistically. I personally think what you were saying, the trade market, I think, is the better market to go for, because if you look at some of these free agents, man, like this list is just a bunch of like C+, B- players. Like, if you, because I had James on last month, and he said that the Pistons want to be like the Houston Rockets last summer.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, that's good and like dandy, but it's like, James, like there's not like, the Houston Rocket free agents that they signed. Like there's no Fred VanVleet out there. There's no Dylan Brooks out there.
Yeah. I mean, let's say hypothetically they go and get Buddy Hield and Tobias Harris. I feel like maybe that could be similar impact to a Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks offseason. Like those are two guys who are going to come in and make a difference day one, and are exactly what they are, and you can rely on them. And I think both stylistically do fit. I know the Pistons had interest in Buddy Hield up until the deadline, and he will be a free agent. We'll see what Philly does with their money, but I feel like the Houston offseason is a little easy to replicate this offseason, just because you're not going and getting like a Kawhi Leonard, like how the Clippers got Kawhi and Paul George. Like you're not going to go and do that, right? Like that's not realistic. But getting a Tobias Harris, Buddy Hield per se, that's something that I could see in the cards.
Yeah, I think the way I viewed it was like, Fred VanVleet, NBA champion, like really good point guard.
Yeah.
Dylan Brooks, for what it's worth, I know the antics are the antics, but he's a really good defender.
Yeah.
And when he's hitting his 3-point shots, that's a player you probably don't want to play against because he's talking shit the whole time.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I just look at free agency and I'm like, if Tobias, goes signs with, I don't know, let's say a reunion in Orlando, because Orlando's going to have a bunch of cap space too.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you never know. I mean, they had Shams Charania put out their wish list, and like I still have like that graphic, and I keep putting an X.
Yeah,
they're like, like Pascal Siakam, nope.
Yep.
It's just like I just don't know what they're gonna do, man. Like they say we're gonna have cap space, and we feel like this is the year to have it. I was like, man, I think last year was the year to have it personally.
Yeah, and they did have it last year too. Someone like Cam Johnson would have really, I feel like, made a difference on this team, and that might be a whiff on their end, because I do know that I heard people told me that Cam had interest in coming to Detroit, so specifically with the Monty Williams reunion, right? So I feel like maybe that there was a whiff there, but I feel like they might have a chance to redeem themselves. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I heard another player basically was going to sign, and I don't want to name the player because the person I talked to is because if I say the player, then people are just going to clip this and like run with it. But
okay,
it was kind of like a lower tier player, and he was like basically willing to come for less, and like he would have been a great fit on this team.
Mm-hmm.
But Troy dragged his feet, and he re-signed with another team, and I was just like, man, that sucks,
right?
Because nothing against Joe Harris, but he was completely shot. Monte Morris, like I was actually kind of excited about, but he just couldn't get healthy, and that's not his fault.
Right.
I mean, he's almost won half as many games in Minnesota in a week, and a whole year with Detroit. Like, he's probably like loving it over there. Like, shout to Monte, but
Flint legend.
I mean, this free agency, man, it's just like so. Like normally I would be excited because we have money, but there's like no free agents. Like I haven't gotten like I just, if people are trying to talk draft with me, I just like, dude, I just don't care.
Yeah,
like I'm over it. I don't care if we have the 5th pick again.
I get it.
But we can wrap this podcast up.
Cool.
If you want to tell the people where they can follow you, how they can support Real Bully Ball, floor is yours again.
Cool. First off, thank you again for having me on here. I really enjoyed talking Pistons. I do writing, I do photography, I do videos for BULLYBALL. That's my platform. www.bullyball.net is our website. At Real BULLYBALL is all of our socials. I do pretty much everything I can over there. I also help with running the socials a little bit. On my personal socials, you can find things I find in press conferences when I attend games. Anything cruise NBA G League related you can find on my socials. My photography you can find on both of my socials, especially my Instagram, which is the same at. I've been trying to pump out a lot more content, a lot more photography, just a lot more art and work in general. So yeah, building something to continue for years to come, hopefully.
Like I said, you're a very good follow. That's why I wanted to have you on. And I know you're a big Piston fan, much like myself. And I think we're very like-minded. We're both pretty laid back. We're not like the extremist Pistons fans. We're not like overreacting. I don't know if anyone has seen this guy. I don't even know his name, but he screams at like highlights. We're not that kind of like Pistons fans.
Right.
I was just like, man, like someone tagged me in it the other day, and like I laughed for like 20 minutes straight. I was like, what is this? But I do appreciate you having on, you coming on. I do have, I think, your socials to Real Bully Ball, the Twitter and your personal Twitter in the description below. But if you want to send me all the other socials, I can put it in the description below so you can get those followers up.
Appreciate you, man.
Always, man, always. Like I said, we did work together for a little bit, but
yeah,
I mean, that could be a podcast all in itself.
Yeah, there's certain people who are doing podcasts about that stuff in general. So
shout out to Justin.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. We will see you next Sunday. Appreciate you guys watching. Peace.